Roundtable Podcast. My name is Shogun. Joining me today is my friend Bart Feynman of Noble Foundation and Noble Group of Companies worldwide. We're going to get into Noble Foundation's history, its mission of Tikkun Olam, or saving or restoring the world from a Jewish religious perspective, and Noble Foundation's worldwide plan. But before we do, make sure you've joined us on the Roundtable Discord server. Check out our Roundtable podcast, hashtag RT Podcast, 200 plus episodes on YouTube and BitChute. Make sure you check them out. That being said, thank you for joining me. Thank you for your patience, Mr. Noble 333. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Just sort of relaxing at the lake where you have a cottage at West Hawk Lake, and my parents are visiting from Cleveland, and my wife is here, so we're spending a few days just doing a little R&R, and then we're heading back to the city tomorrow.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so glad we could get you on today. I'm looking forward to this conversation. So you're one of my special Roundtable friends that I actually met live in person in Winnipeg and then brought onto the server, whereas most of my friends I meet online. So you represent Noble Foundation, as your name indicates and as your profile picture indicates. So why don't you begin by introducing the audience, live and recorded, to Noble Foundation. What is it, and what is its purpose, and what is its mission?
I'll talk a little bit about it and give it a little bit of background. There are two components to Noble. There's the Noble Foundation Worldwide, which is my global philanthropic foundation, whose mission is Tikkun Olam, which is Hebrew for repair the world. It is not a Jewish foundation per se. Its mission is consistent with Jewish law, which suggests that it is incumbent on mankind and, of course, womankind to help your fellow person and help as much as possible in influence their lives so that they can reach their true aspiration and dreams, and to solve the world's problems that are facing people from all walks of life globally. That could be anything from COVID-19 to cancer, to environmental issues, to poverty, to educational discrepancies. I'll go through some of the areas that we're involved in. The foundation, the Noble Foundation Worldwide, is funded by the funding arm of Noble, which is the Noble Group of Companies Worldwide Holdings, which is a private consortium of companies which I established since 1987 when I formed Noble Investment Corporation. And it's made up of 3,364 very large operating companies. 100% of the profits from these companies flow into the Noble Foundation Worldwide and are used for philanthropy and charitable giving. I don't see a cent of that money. That money all goes to charity. There's another company that's critical called Worldview Capital Management Corporation, which takes all of our global cash flow from the 3,364 operating companies and manages it using proprietary mathematics in the world financial markets, growing capital at exponential rates, which allows me to address any world problem that presents itself. So I'm self-funded. I'm not trying to be arrogant, but I have the resources to solve the problems that face humanity, and that's what my life's mission is.
Very interesting. So I think this ties into this concept of Tikkun Olam. Is that correct? And for those who aren't familiar, can you explain what Tikkun Olam means and where it comes from?
Sure. Tikkun Olam is not only the mission of my foundation, it's the mission of the Jewish people. Tikkun Olam means repair or perfect the world, and it is the job of the Jewish people to serve as a beacon for humanity, to serve as a light, to try to help the rest of the world show people how to treat each other properly with respect, be kind to each other, and to help do good deeds. In the Torah, there are 613 mitzvot. Mitzvot means good deed, and we as Jews are supposed to be practicing these 613 good deeds. So that mechanically, what you're doing is actively doing good deeds that are concrete and have meaning and impact people's lives. So the foundation adopted the mission of the Jewish people to be consistent with the Jewish people of Tikkun Olam, or repair or perfect the world. And when I say perfected, I don't want to look at it in an abstract way. That sounds a little bit abstract. I mean, areas such as, I'll give you some of the areas that we do. We do global security. We're in charge of security for the world's security apparatus, working with countries and agencies, the Mossad and other agencies, CIA, other major security agencies, global healthcare and research. So we're responsible for a hospital system that we run, that we're trying to make sure that we have universal healthcare available on an expeditious basis. Research in healthcare, so that we can research and cure cancers and heart problems and any type of disease that there is. So that's part of our portfolio of activity. Global poverty, addressing hunger and poverty issues globally. Global economic activities and job creation, global innovation and technology. It goes on the list. We address every single problem that there is in the world, and that is my mission in life.
Amazing. And to be clear, you are a Canadian national, but also an Israeli passport holder. Is that correct?
I was born in Chicago, so I'm American. My father is a doctor who trained in Chicago first, where I was born. And so I hold an American passport. I then moved to Winnipeg and grew up in Winnipeg and hold a Canadian passport. And I also, because of what we're doing for the state of Israel, we're major supporters of the state of Israel. And I'll get into the Palestinian situation in a few minutes, if you'll remind me. But I'm also an Israeli citizen and carry a diplomatic Israeli passport. So I have 3 passports.
Understood. So to clarify, you are running Noble Foundation, Noble Group of Corporations worldwide. You're trying to address every different policy area, from security to healthcare to the environment. And you are a triple passport holder representing both America, Canada, and Israel. So I guess the question then is, do you want to get into, I mean, there's so many avenues here, but you've also talked to me about the financial trading that you guys do. And one of the pictures that you provided me was Noble Investment, and you talked about using chaos mathematics or some kind of proprietary investment formula. Do you want to quickly touch on?
Sure. It's not a touchy subject, but it's one that's very much presents security issues for us. These trade in covert locations. These massive walls of computers that trade the world financial markets 24 hours a day, earning millions of % return on capital, which is funneled into Noble Foundation worldwide for expediting projects. And the model itself was developed by a Jewish mathematician, started it, it's named Ephraim Hoffman, and he's got Running Alpha Capital, which is worth checking out if you can check out his site. He's a very bright individual. He and I parted ways at one point. I completed the model, it wasn't complete, and I used the model to fund the foundation, not for personal profits. I made my money when I was younger, and I'm comfortable, and it's not like I need any more money. I've got planes and cars and whatever I need. Not to be arrogant, but money was never important to me. It was never what drove me. I could have sat on the beach at 24 for the rest of my life, but I decided I wanted to fix the world, and that was my job. As another aside, when I was 10 years old, I lived in Israel, and I got a starter pistol, and I walked around Israel guarding Israel. And now my foundation guards Israel, protects Israel, works with the Mossad and the Israeli Defense Forces and the Bet Shin security forces, and we're a big friend of Israel. Now, people might say, well, why just Israel? What I'm hoping to do is what we were able to do working. I had worked with uh, people in the Trump organization, Jared Kushner, and specifically to uh, create a peace treaty between Israel and like the United Arab Emirates, which is an area that focuses Dubai largely on money and capital, and there were commonalities that could be negotiated for working together. What I ultimately want to do is see peace between the Palestinians, and I would like to see the Palestinians have their own independent state. And I'm prepared to pay for funding activities, education, and funding and helping them get their own state. That would be something that would be of interest on a different subject.
Now, obviously, things pertaining to intelligence, such as Hamas, or rather, I'm sorry, Mossad or the CIA, is going to be somewhat confidential. But can you tell us anything at all about your work with these security apparatuses, how you made contact with them, or what kind of work you do with them, even in general terms?
Sure. The story goes as follows. I was. I'll back up for a minute. I was featured in May of 1990 in Manitoba Business Magazine, which is our provincial business magazine, as an up-and-coming Izzy Asper, who was a billionaire from Winnipeg. And Izzy Asper contacted me and said, come meet with me. He sort of summoned me to meet with him. And this was the first time in my life, the only time in my life where I was sort of intimidated by meeting anybody. It would never happen again. But I was intimidated. And I met with him, and we became extremely close friends. He had a great deal of vision, and I consider myself to have a pretty good amount of vision. And we did business together. He told me to lock up all the land at Winnipeg International Airport, which I did. And now we're developing it years later to bring in Israeli aircraft industries, Air Canada, and all kinds of different players, cargo jets, all kinds of cargo lux, all kinds of players that need to come to develop Winnipeg into a major aerospace center and center of aviation excellence. So Izzy and I were friends. He also brought Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, to Winnipeg on my birthday, and I met with him and Izzy near the concert hall, and I poached his chief of security, personal security, a fellow named Ari Duran, who became my chief of global security, because we have hotels and properties and office buildings and airport properties and airplanes and all kinds of assets that need to be protected from a security, physical security, and informational security point of view. And Ari Duran runs my world out of Tel Aviv. He's also reports to the Prime Minister of Israel and is in charge of security for the state of Israel. So I have a dual kind of role. When I met with Shimon Peres, who was the president of Israel, he told me to consider myself the de facto president of Israel. He said it's kind of tongue in cheek, but I've always taken it to heart that I would, if I could go down the years from now and all went well, it would be an honor for me to be the president of Israel, and I have great plans for Israel. But first things first, I would like to see peace between the Palestinians, because Palestinians, I'm not bashing my own people, but they've made it very difficult for Palestinians to function freely, and they need to be treated like human beings. And Israel has security worries, and they're not doing it to be punitive. They're doing it out of necessity, but it's got to stop, and it's got to be resolved.
So I just want to double check. You mentioned Izzy, and of course, as Winnipeggers, we know Izzy as Israel Asper. Is this who you're referring to? Okay, so
Yes.
you've met Israel Asper, very important person in Winnipeg politics, and you've actually.
I was in partnership with Izzy for airport properties, and we did other projects together. And I helped to an extent. I assisted behind the scenes, very quietly. Was involved with. I had met with Gail Asper, his daughter, who's got a great deal of vision, and she asked me for money for the Human Rights Museum. We gave her some money, and we also helped promote the Human Rights Museum as it stands, because that was one of the legacies that Izzy asked me to help him with. Gail is now doing a museum in Israel, and I may assist her with that too. I'm just waiting to hear back from her.
So you have had direct personal face-to-faces with Israel Asper, with Benjamin Netanyahu, and with Shimon Peres. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so for those who don't know, these are the most influential Jewish businessman in Winnipeg, the president of the Israeli political party currently in power, Benjamin Netanyahu, and Shimon Peres is who again? The president of Israel?
He was the president of Israel.
Okay, so these are big names, big players in the game.
Well, look, I could go on. I also know Donald Trump, and I also know Joe Biden. And this is part of my strategy. The strategy is simple. Money talks. And Joe Biden, I'll use Joe as an example. When the election was coming up, just prior to him being reelected or elected as president, we offered money to say to his campaign, how much money would it take for us to have face-to-face time by Zoom, or a similar platform, with Joe Biden, and we had about 45 minutes with him. I wanted to find out if he's the right guy for the presidential job. Donald Trump, Brian Boudreau, his chief of development in Nevada, approached us years ago to do a development in Nevada with them, where Donald Trump wanted to put his name on the building and Noble would develop the building. I was not enamored with doing business with Donald Trump, just because I don't see that Noble has the same philosophy as Trump in terms of business. We consider ourselves very ethical, and he operates in a different plane, to put it politely. But I kept them close as friends, and met Ivanka and Donald Trump Jr. and Jared Kushner, who I worked with on the peace accord. And these are all people. They're just people. like I said, I'm not intimidated by people. These are people. He was the president of the United States. Well, I'm the chairman of Noble, and we want to fix the world. So we look above all the problems, and we try very much so to work to solve these problems. That's all.
So, because you mentioned your connection to Donald and Ivanka Trump, I do think a lot of people in this community and in the audience would be curious about that. So, can you tell us just a little bit more about how you first met the Trump family and what that was like?
Sure. We met them in New York. My wife didn't go to that trip, as far as I recall. I met him and David Simpkin, my CEO and managing director of the Noble Foundation Worldwide and the Noble Group of Companies. He's based in Luxembourg. He's generally puts the deals together, and he asked me to meet with them, which is rare that I that I meet with people, but I thought at this juncture I would meet with them. We met at his apartment on Trump Tower, and he wanted to show off his gilded gold. I can't remember if it was on the 99th floor. It was high up on the building, and he was very happy to show off his trappings and pick us up by limo at the airport and show us his 757 aircraft, and on it went.
All right. So just a back step, anyone who's looking right now in the chat at your profile picture can see your Noble Foundation logo, which appears to be, as I would read it, the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments, on either side of which being two lions rampant, as you say in heraldry, rampant, standing upright. Can you just break this down a little bit for us, the symbolism of this logo?
The symbolism comes from the Torah, the Old Testament, and it's the lions of Judah protecting the Ten Commandments. So the idea is to protect the laws and that people are supposed to abide by for humanity and ethicality and goodness. And the lions protect the Ten Commandments. And then there's noble written underneath, which is to do things nobly. To me, means to do things at all transactional levels, to do them ethically and morally. And we don't do a deal with somebody where somebody loses and somebody wins. It's about everybody winning. You meet the needs of everybody and then you satisfy everybody. I'm searching for a perfect world and a perfect solution at every level that we're transacting.
Well, I understand, and I think in principle, this is where Roundtable and Noble share explicit values: benevolence, honor, nobility, etc. So that's very interesting. So let me ask you this: in the current world situation that we're in right now, what would you say is Noble's number one priority? Since you have all these different interests and all these different organizations and all these different portfolios, do you have a number one priority?
Yeah, the number one priority still remains the security of the state of Israel. But the number two priority, which I would put almost equal to the number one priority, is global healthcare, and that's broken down into treating people through hospitalizations and treatments, seeing doctors, treatments, surgeries, all the things that are needed to maintain humanity and human life. But the other part that's perhaps more important is the solving of diseases that affect humanity. Cancer being number one, heart, all the problems. You go down the list of what people are dying from. I will share this with you. We were funders quietly, and I don't even know if my family knows this, but we funded COVID vaccines of Pfizer, Moderna, and Johnson and Johnson. We didn't do AstraZeneca, but we did this to try to expedite it by providing resources that were focused as part of the Warp Speed initiative, and we did it very quietly. And I this is the first time I would even mention something that we've invested in specifically, because we give anonymously. The highest form of charity in Judaism is to give anonymously. So you don't put your name on a building unless you want to look good for yourself. So I don't put Feynman on buildings. I may put noble on buildings if it stands for something noble and it's something that people could buy into and believe in. But we do things anonymously and very quietly. This podcast for me is a first time coming out since this Manitoba Business Magazine. I've been asked for years and years by newspapers and magazines to talk to them about what has happened in my life since the May 1990, what I've done and what has happened with Noble, and I've refused to do it until such time as the foundation is getting ready to prepare a global websites, which will have all the information about the foundation. It will not talk about our companies, our 3,364 operating companies. And I'll give you one example. I'll share with you a company that's ours. Boeing. Boeing is one of our companies. Now, Boeing, the model tells us when to buy and sell stocks. So Boeing, we bought it at $89. It's now, I didn't look at it, but it's $200 plus. The model tells us when to buy companies and when to take over companies. And Boeing, we got involved in the Boeing 737 MAX, and we're involved in getting it back in safely in the skies. It's still not perfectly safe, and we have work to do on it. But we want to have aviation safety so that no planes crash. A perfect world, tikkun olam, means perfect flights, perfect situations. But one of the reasons I don't want to attach Noble Group of Companies Worldwide Holdings to the companies that we own is because if a plane crashes, I don't want it tainting Noble. I want Noble to remain pristine. If something happened to Air Canada or any of our holdings, I don't want it to come back to Noble. So what we do is we have the companies operating separately. They all have their own websites. There's the holding company. Legally, they're all connected, but from a informational point of view, we don't disclose our holding.
Well, I understand that that you don't disclose your holdings. I have one of my audience members asking a question. Does your company own Boeing, or do you own some of Boeing's stock? Are you an investor in Boeing, or are you an owner of Boeing?
We are a very large owner of Boeing through proxies, and we have the option to take controlling interest of Boeing.
Thank you. So you mentioned to me in our private conversation with your business partner that took place in Winnipeg over beers, which was quite enjoyable, that you had recently requisitioned a new aircraft, which had some pretty advanced features. Can you say anything about that product requisition of this aircraft, which you said was one of three, I believe, on the way?
Sure. We have Noble runs like a company called NetJets with Warren Buffett, and we're quiet partners with him, and that has 1,000+ airplanes that we use on fractional jet ownership and other types of ownership for wealthy individuals and corporations. But more importantly, for our own use, we have 3 planes. We have a Challenger 604 extended range. We have a Global Express 8000, and we have a 747-800 Intercontinental, which has been customized to exceed the strengths of Air Force One. And I have 2 more 747-800 Intercontinentals that are being ordered. So I'll have 3 birds in case there's any mechanical issues. Those planes are going to be painted with the Canadian, American, and Israeli flag. And as I fly from city to city in the world, doing tikkun olam, repairing the world, and helping different cities and countries, we're going to add flags of those countries to the side of the aircraft. So eventually it'll be covered in world flags.
And when you say that it will exceed the capabilities of Air Force One, you mean in terms of like hardening from attack? Like these will be very durable planes, very resilient.
These planes could shoot down Air Force One.
I see. Fascinating.
Not that I'm purporting to suggest that I'm going to shoot down Air Force One. I don't want the Secret Service showing up at my door. But right. I'm saying it tongue in cheek. But no, this plane is to protect me and my family, and they are the safest, most adept aircraft in the world, and I've had them customized.
Very interesting. So what would you say is the biggest challenges outside of Israeli security for repairing the world, restoring the world? You've talked about healthcare and Israeli security, but what are some other direct avenues that you're concerned about today in this regard?
I think prejudice is one of them. I think I want to take the Human Rights Museum and expand it in terms of prejudice too, and bring people from around the world, put them in our hotels in Winnipeg, fly them on our planes, and systematically educate people about how to be tolerant towards their fellow human beings. I think people who are gay, or people who are black, or people who are brown, or people who are yellow. I don't see people that way. I never have. I see people as human beings, and I love to get to know any person that I can from every walk of life. And every human being is important, and everybody has a dream and a goal and aspirations that should be met. And so I think that to talk about prejudice, that would be one major thing that needs to be addressed.
Well, we're in
And that
agreement on, and
that would fall that would fall under our education uh, portfolio, but it needs its own more. As I think about it, as I'm talking about it, it needs to be more front and center.
right. And for those who don't know, the Winnipeg Museum of Human Rights is sort of a capstone project. It's a big deal for our city. It's a museum dedicated to raising awareness of human rights and violations of human rights. And you said you have some involvement in this. Is that correct, Bart?
I did. I'm not even sure if Gail Asper knew what I did to help move the project along. It's not important at this time, but I was quite involved with it, and still am involved with it peripherally. And I hope to contact. I put in a text to Gail about 2 days ago, and we're going to be talking more about it. There
Sorry.
was an issue. There was an issue. There was an issue at the Human Rights Museum. There was racism that came out in management. So it was very ironic, sadly ironic, that the Human Rights Museum was experiencing this type of racism that was part of the culture, which has been addressed since that point. But there's still work that needs to be done. You there, Daniel?
Shogun, I would just like to let you know that if there's an issue with your mic, it might have presented itself again. So I'm just informing you. While he's fixing his mic, do you mind if I ask you one or two questions?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
Sure, by all means.
Uh, I guess I want to know oh, when it comes to the educational stuff, how do you gauge how effective that is? Like, what metrics do you use to know whether an educational outreach program has the desired result?
That's an excellent question. We use our sort of customized approach when we do that. We don't use standardized metrics and measurements. We find them to not be that useful. I like doing. I get involved when we do smaller groups. I get involved in speaking directly to the people who are being educated to get feedback in terms of what their experience is. And we use that to come back and modify and iterate and refine our programs accordingly.
So basically, more focused, smaller initiatives, and then rapid prototype. Cool.
We do small pilot projects to get them very effective, and then we roll them out into larger groups.
Another.
Just
Oh,
test. Am
Shogun
I?
is back. I'll let him take back over. Thank you.
No,
Very much.
Durish, thank you for stepping in. I'm sorry, Stage occasionally kicks my audio out, and we certainly want to get your questions, everybody in the audience. But there's a few more things I wanted to ask. So you did mention that you met with Benjamin Netanyahu, who is one of the most influential world leaders today, the leader of Israel, essentially one of the most powerful nations in many ways. So I'd love for you to tell us anything you can about that interaction.
Well, I know him in a huge number of ways, and I know him extremely well, and I'm very close friends with him. And his house is near my house in Israel. Uh, the thing of it is when I went to live in Israel in 1976, I don't know if you're maybe too young to remember the Entebbe hijacking, but there was the Entebbe hijacking that took place right in front of my eyes at the airport. My family and I were flying from Athens to Israel, and the Entebbe hijacking took place with people running with machine guns and watched the Air France plane take off, and it was liberated. And the Israelis did a rescue mission, and Benjamin Netanyahu's brother Yonatan was shot and killed during that rescue operation. He was the major casualty, and I was at a meeting in Israel, and I opened the elevator, and there was Benjamin Netanyahu coming out of the elevator, and I said to him, "I'm very sorry about your brother." And we started talking, and this was the first encounter I had had with him, and we spent about an hour and a half talking together in the bar. I think it was the King David Hotel, and I became very close with him, and 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 tried to work with him to help the Israeli situation, particularly security issues, but also in terms of development. Noble has the largest, with a fellow named Avi Aronson, the largest, who's since passed away, but has the largest construction and development company in Israel. We're the biggest developers in Israel, and so we build property there. And part of the thing that I've been trying to say is I don't think the settlements. This is another statement where I would be contra to a lot of Jewish people, but I think about things pragmatically, and I try to be fair when I take positions. I don't just say, "Well, I'm Jewish, so I've got to take the Jewish position," or "I'm Palestinian, I have to take the Palestinian position." I look at the pragmatic, and I always say there's three sides to every story: your side, my side, and the truth lies in between. And that's the way to get to consensus, is by negotiating by needs of people and satisfying people's needs. So part of what I'm saying is the settlements in the West Bank that the Jews have been building are irritating the Palestinians. They're considering it a threat, and the Jews are sort of flaunting it in their face a little bit and saying, "Well, it's our land, and it is our land. We captured it, and it was given to us, so it is our land." But that's not the point. The point is you don't have to flaunt it and cause greater rift when the interest is trying to be peace in the Middle East. So I would say that getting back to Benjamin Netanyahu, he had a more right-wing kind of opinion. He wanted to have the settlements go ahead, and he wanted to have a one-state solution, it looked like when I was last talking to him. But there needs to be the new prime minister, Bennett, I believe is his name. I haven't met him yet. I'm going to meet him next month in Israel, and I'm going to see what can be done in terms of working with him and seeing what his position is. And perhaps there's a better chance to make a new start. Maybe we need some fresh blood. So that's the way I look at it.
I see. Very interesting. And so I'm a little bit uneducated about this. If Benjamin Netanyahu is I think, prime minister of Israel, what is his relationship then to Shimon Peres? Are they both sharing power? Is this a president, prime minister, or first minister position? Like, forgive my ignorance, but how does this work out? Like, who is
Well,
Shimon Peres?
Shimon Peres is deceased, so he's no longer alive. But he won the Nobel Peace Prize, and the funny story was I think it's funny, as I was with him in his backyard in Caesarea, and I I said to him, "You didn't win the Nobel Peace Prize. I haven't given you the Nobel Peace Prize." And he found that to be quite funny. And this is what got us into our conversation about me becoming the proxy prime minister or president of the state of Israel. And I look at myself as that's my job. I don't need the title. I don't want the title. I don't want, the thing is, I don't want anything. I don't want recognition. I don't want this podcast has made me somewhat uncomfortable because it's the first time I'm verbalizing a lot of these things. My family knows this. That my closest friends know that I run an investment company, but most of my friends don't know I have airplanes, and it's too uncomfortable. I don't want to make them feel badly that they don't have airplanes or that they don't have money, and so I try to remain low key. But anyways, I don't want to ramble, but this is something that's very important to me to be able to vocalize and verbalize what I want to accomplish with Noble, and the questions you're asking are very helpful in guiding them.
Well, I'm glad, and we're very honored that this would be your first avenue for getting your message out. You know, it's great to have you on the podcast. And that brings us to the third point you gave me, which is Noble Foundation's worldwide plan. So here we are in 2021. We're dealing with COVID, climate change, terrorism, insecurity. The Taliban have taken control of Afghanistan. So, what is Noble's foundation's plan for, say, the next 10 years or 20 years, 10 years, let's say? What would you say? What is Noble Foundation's worldwide plan?
Well, my plan is to address the approximately 10 areas that we outlined in terms of global security, and that includes you break it down and drill down into these things. Global security means what's Afghanistan falls into it, Iran falls into it, China falls into it, North Korea falls into it. There's many different areas which we're involved in, and the thing for me is I have the people who work for me are Israelis. My pilots are Israeli Air Force pilots. My security, personal security, who guard my family and guard my life, are Israeli security. Uh, and our intelligence is work for Ari Duran. Our global intelligence network is we have the Noble intelligence agencies, the NIA. We have our own little agency that works with the other agencies quietly. And so from that point of view, in terms of terrorism and in terms of security, that's a big area for us. Physical security at airports, training. We use Israelis to train airport officials in terms of screening like they do at El Al. El Al hasn't had a crash since like the 50s or major attacks. And it's an airline which is always targeted by terrorists. And the way they do it is they are extremely vigilant and careful about how they guard their aircraft and their personnel and how they screen their passengers, and all of those types of skills would go there. The other thing is police forces need to be trained. So we're involved in funding police force training where Israelis teach police Krav Maga, hand-to-hand protection, and also just basic ways to diffuse situations so they don't escalate, and handling emergent situations. So there's lots of training like that. In terms of education, I want to be addressing over the coming year and 5 years areas of the world that don't have access to education. So we're going to build schools, and we have plans to build schools. I won't go into the specifics right now, but we have plans to build schools globally. We have plans to build addictions facilities globally. That's not education, but part of it is education, on educating people on how to manage themselves and their addictions. And we have plans essentially for every core area. We're rolling out housing. We have land, for instance, in Winnipeg to bring it closer to home. We have a great deal of land in the North End and other parts of Winnipeg that will be developed for, I hate to use the word low income housing, affordable housing for people, so that people can afford to live in housing and not be on the street. So there's a great deal that we're doing.
And I'm certainly glad to hear that. So I think we're getting close to the point where we should open it up to audience question and AMA. But before we do, I guess I'd like to ask you one more time, what are some of the most promising or exciting avenues that you see for Noble Foundation expanding from 2021 to, let's say, 2025? Just in terms of priorities and just in terms of specific interests or concerns. And then we'll open it up to conversation with the audience.
Well, one of the most exciting things, this is for me personally, is to connect with more people and to connect with people around the world. And I have a strategy which involves Facebook, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but I'm working carefully with Mark Zuckerberg to try to partner with Facebook in getting it to be more user friendly and getting it. I want to connect with as many people as possible and help them get jobs and find not just jobs, but to realize their life dreams, to really connect with people deeply and have people deeply connect with each other than on a cursory basis, and so that we can find out how we can get them involved volunteering for Noble. We're also going to have a store. You mentioned a store that you have on your site, Shogun, which is something that we're going to be doing. We're going to be having, even though we have the capital and we're self-funded for our foundation, I want people to vote with their feet. I want people to participate in solutions as partners with us. So I want people to provide some, even if it's small capital, 10 cents, 25 cents, $1, $5, $10, whatever they can donate. We're going to have it set up that they can donate, and they'll be provided with a Noble mug or shirt or some paraphernalia. And we're also going to have it where the people who provide funding will also be able to have their resume sent in so that we can look at hiring them for the foundation or for any of our companies. So we want it to be a systematic way to bring in people, because the hardest part that I have is hiring people. I can't not hire people. Every person I speak to, I hire to do something.
All right, so we'll get into that further, but we have here our first audience question from my friend Traveler. Shouldn't be necessary, but of course remaining respectful, polite, and friendly, polite, and respectful. That's the family vibe. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Bart Feynman, we're going to open it up to audience questions now. Is that all right?
Sure.
So Traveler, go ahead.
Okay, so you mentioned something about, educating the people, you need education in schools. I think more important than that is you need clean water and houses, because, right now in Palestine, like if I remember correctly, is like 85% of the water that they have. It's not even drinkable.
Yeah.
And you have the world's biggest refugee crisis going on, which is the Palestinians. Like they don't need school; they need water, homes, and food. You know.
I agree with you totally. Totally. Sorry, I missed that. That is a critical avenue. Absolutely need clean water, and need places that they can live that are suitable and not low level places for people to suffer in. They need places where they can have dignity.
Yeah, that's all I was gonna say. I think above all, water, food, that's what they need in homes. They
Yeah.
don't need
Yes.
education.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Traveler. Good question. If anybody else has a question, you just got to hit your little wave icon there. Request to speak. We'll bring you up here. If anyone wants to ask a question to Mr. Feynman, it looks like Mode for Truth is up. So let's bring Mode for Truth up here. Invited to speak. I think you should be able to accept it. I'm still not 100% sure how this. Yeah, there we go. Okay, Mode, go ahead with your question.
So my question is, how you feel about the Freemasons?
I don't know what to tell you. How do you feel about the Freemasons?
Well, I'm just trying to gauge to see whether or not you're a member of the Freemasons, because I couldn't help but notice the 333, because I know that's like a very interesting number for the Freemasons. So I was just curious to know. And you also did mention as well that you are working with Mark Zuckerberg, who I believe is part of the secret society, and he rose in certain circles. And in order to be able to actually get into those types of circles, you pretty much have to be a member of the Brotherhood. So I just wanted to get your opinion. So, what do you think about the Freemasons?
Well, I don't know the Freemasons a great deal. I'm not a Freemason, and in terms of Mark Zuckerberg, and in terms of any individual I deal with, I don't deal with them as part of secret group. I deal with them one on one as person to person.
You kind of broke out there. I'm not sure if you can still hear or if you're still talking.
Just to inform you, it seems like your mic might also be having an issue. You may need to disconnect real quick, the way Shogun did.
Who,
Sorry.
me?
No, our guest.
Oh, yes, that's true.
Yeah, sometimes leaving and coming back to the room will reset your audio. Bart, if you're not able to be heard, try hitting the little red leave the room button and then try coming back on stage. Thank you for your questions, everybody. I saw Mr.
I have another question for Noble.
Yeah.
We're
We're
going to come
going to
back.
give you a chance as soon as Bart gets back into the stage. He can answer your questions. So go ahead and hit that wave icon, Bart, and become a speaker. We should be able to bring him back up here. He says he's showing invite to speak. I still don't know how to bring someone up here. Yeah, hit your little wave icon there, your little hand. Become a speaker. You should be able to come up here. Did we still not figure this out? Like, how do we get this guy up here?
If he has the power, he might actually already have a button to the left of the hand, which allows him to become a speaker without needing to make the request. And so the hand, if it says show requests, then he has the power to elevate himself. However, if he doesn't have that power, then he has to request it and then grant it.
Yeah, he should be able to either way because we gave him Knight of the Round Table rank and he's been invited to speak. But I'm still not sure how to get him up to the stage. We did it before. Let's see if we can do it again. Invite to speak. Move to, servant undeafened. He was deafened. So, Bart.
The wonders of post-production is this all can be edited out after the fact.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But Bart, if you can hit that wave icon, become a speaker, come up here. That would be great. He's been invited. Well, that's unfortunate. I feel like there's some way to get this guy up here. Gosh darn it, stage. I don't know. To get up here than he could have.
If you have the power, there'll be potentially 3 different buttons on the bottom of your screen. The hand might be in the middle, which would simply say show request. And to the left of that would be another button, which would allow you to join if you have that power. If you do not have the roles, then there will be, the hand should then be request access.
Yeah, because all you guys are coming up here.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yeah, we can. We're all here, so whatever we're doing, he should have to do.
Yeah, Noble, if you were to click on your own profile, your own picture there should be the option that pops up that says become a speaker.
Yeah, so click on your own picture of your logo on your own image, and then click become a speaker, and you should be able to jump back up here to the chat. So if you're on the bottom there in the audience.
That's a right click, by the way, if you're on a computer. If you're on a phone, I do not know what the option is.
Well, that's unfortunate. Because all I can do is invite him to speak. I don't have any other abilities, and I've done that. There we go. Thank you, Lava. Welcome back, Noble.
Thank you.
Okay, so where were we? Mode, you were asking about Freemasons. He said he's not a Freemason. He doesn't know too much about Freemasonry.
Yeah, I have another question. Like, how hopeful are you for the future of society with the way things are going? Do you think that in order for your objectives in your company that you're hopeful that things will go back to normal the way things were in 2019, or do you think that that's something that you're not really trying to bother yourself with? And could there possibly be an impediment of your goals if there was to be a shift where there is now a drastic change in the new normal of what they're trying to fashion for the world right now?
Are you talking specifically about COVID?
I'm talking about the trends of where things are leading towards, where there are new changes being, put into motion, where People are being mandated to be vaccinated before they can travel. People are also under the threat of losing their jobs if they don't take a vaccine. That kind of thing. Where, in order for, and they're also talking about the Delta variants that could also possibly be killing off a lot of people in the future. So, how hopeful are you for the future of humanity, and what are you hoping to see with the new variants of the mutated COVID-19, which could possibly mutate into another variant of another, with the Delta variants? Go ahead.
I'm very hopeful that things will move back more towards normality. In Winnipeg here, they just had a couple of football games where there were 30,000 people in the stands, maskless, and they were all double vaccinated. And people wore masks when they went to the concessions, but for the most part, they didn't wear masks and appear to be okay. And I believe that what's going to happen is there's going to be different variants that come out. I think people are going to need booster shots each year for the foreseeable future. And I think it'll be controllable, more like the flu, eventually die down somewhat. And I think we're going to be fine. In terms of my general viewpoint of optimism, I'm the most optimistic person. I believe everything and anything is possible. Anything the human mind can conceive, good or evil, can be accomplished. And hopefully it's good. And when people collaborate together towards solutions for problems instead of bitching about problems, then everything is possible.
Thank you.
I
And
see.
thank you, Mode, for your questions. So again, we're at the question and answer point. So if anybody has a question, feel free to jump up to the stage and ask it. Go ahead, Drewish.
Okay, sorry, I couldn't request to join. I only have the power to join up.
That's fine. Yeah, even better. Go ahead.
My question is something of a two-parter, but very related. When you're doing, educational work and philanthropy in a world where people are, they're quite cynical sometimes and skeptical, and how do you deal with the two types of people that I'm sure have to be a thorn in your side, sycophants and contrarians? The sort of people who there are two different kinds of people. The sort of people who, if you have money, you're just trying to latch on to it, and the other kind, the sort of people who view any attempt to help as meddling and naturally resist against it. Like, how do you deal with those two types of people?
Well, I'll give you an example. Several years ago, I decided that we were going to fix the Manitoba healthcare system, the Noble Foundation worldwide, by serving to provide universal healthcare, not private healthcare, but universal solutions to problems. And let's imagine that MRIs was the only problem in the system where there was bottlenecks, and instead of having same-day service for an MRI, you had to wait 8 weeks to get an MRI. So Noble would do a business plan and say, well, how many MRI machines do we need to have operating to move it from 8 weeks down to 1 day service? And we'll pay for the MRIs, we'll pay for the staff, we'll pay for the building, we'll pay for the heat and the lights and the telephone and everything that's needed. And that'll be a Noble Foundation solution. So I met with the healthcare minister, and it was Tim Sale was the person, and he said, you can't do that. That's private medicine. I said, I could do it, private medicine. It's public medicine. We're doing it for free. What are you going to do? Noble to provide $100 million to the Manitoba healthcare system. Doer government says no. Like, what's going to go on? So you do have the naysayers that cause problems. But ultimately, if you have the resources, you can push through solutions. Now, it's not my goal to push through solutions. I would rather have people. I would rather have people who are working with us closely for solutions. But the bottom line is we're doing it anyways. We have our plans. We're implementing our plans, and we'll do end runs around people who cause us problems, who are standing in the way of solutions. You have to know that your solution is pristine. You have to know that it's the right solution before you do it. You can't ram things down people's throats. It's not right. But once you know what the vision is and that it's the right vision, you just have to do it.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so one last chance. If anyone in the audience wants to ask a question or make a comment, maybe Mr. Dawson for Noble.
Oh, is my microphone working? Shogun, are you there? Hey, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hey, so really interesting show. The one question that comes to mind is you're talking about your trying to raise money for your causes, and I'm wondering what do you hope to gain out of asking people for small $5 to $10 donations if you have a large knowledge base of billionaires and high wealth individuals? What does small dollar donors give you that the large dollar donors can't?
Well, I don't need the large dollar donors. We are the large dollar donor. What I do need is small donors in order for symbolism, symbolic donorship in terms of I want people, if we're going to clean up a forest or an oil spill or do something that's going to solve cancer, I want people participating in the solution other than saying, oh, yeah, I support it. That's a good thing you're doing. I would like them to provide at least a little bit of finance to symbolically say we're part of this and that we make them a founding partner in donating as part members of the Noble Foundation worldwide.
So, excellent question, Dawson. Do you have another?
No, I'm still thinking about this whole thing because I'll be honest. Some of it, I think someone mentioned it earlier. I can't remember who it was, but like some people are cynical or some people are sycophants. I definitely am on more of the cynical, skeptical side. So a lot of this does sound too good to be true. I hope I'm wrong, but we'll see.
If I could just add one thing, I've been doing this for 34 years, and this is not new. So the projects that we've done to date have all been successful over time. Not every project, but virtually every project has been successful. So this is just a matter now of coming out with more exposure so that it'll be more public through a website that we're developing, a global website, and the world will know about the Noble Foundation worldwide. And I want to build a movement of Tikkun Olam over the course systematically. So I appreciate your skepticism. I think it's natural. I think it's important to always question things, to always question authority, and to always question people, and I think that's natural.
Well, I do have one. I do have one additional question. And no offense to Shogun here, but you definitely sound like an accomplished person who has access to capital. Why remain in Winnipeg when there are other potentially better cities out there?
Well, I love Winnipeg, first of all. I live in Winnipeg. We have a residence also in the U.S., and our main house is in Israel and Caesarea on the Mediterranean. and we travel.
So I think this has been extremely interesting. I think we've got a chance to ask you a lot of questions, and in the future, we'd love to have you back on the podcast again, Noble. Looks like Mode has one more question, perhaps. So let's try and bring him up here if we can. Mode, you should be able to jump. Yeah, Mode, do you have a question for Mr. Noble, Mr. Bart Feynman?
Yeah, so would you be opposed or open to the idea of receiving assistance from the United Nations to achieve your goals for your foundation?
I would be open to receiving any help from anybody as long as it made sense and it wasn't political.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mode. Thank you, Dawson, and everybody who asked questions. And thank you, especially Mr. Bart Feynman, for answering our questions today and appearing on our podcast. It was great to have you. So I want to ask you, Bart, do you have any final closing message or takeaway for the people listening in the audience? We got 12 people live, and or well, especially the live audience, or rather the recorded audience later who will hear this on YouTube and BitChute. Do you have a final closing message for the people?
I would just like to say to people to follow your dreams and pretend somebody offers you a certain sum of money and puts it in your bank account, and that frees you up financially such that you don't have to work again. What would you be doing with your life? And try to follow those dreams and be true to yourself.
Well, that's a great message. And again, thank you for your time, Bart. We appreciate you being on the Roundtable podcast. I think that's a good place to wrap it up for tonight. You're more than welcome to come on anytime and let us know what's going on with Nobel Foundation. So thank you for being on the podcast. Thank you to the live audience for attending, and especially thank you to everybody who asked questions. Make sure you join the Roundtable Discord server. Make sure you check out hashtag RT Podcast. Join our BitChute channel, our YouTube channel, and our YouTube live channel. We have over 200 episodes, all different on all different platforms. And keep an eye on announcements channel for upcoming events, and keep an eye out on RT Podcast for this and other events to be uploaded for you to listen to again or share with your friends. Thank you, Mr. Feynman. We appreciate your time. And yeah, it was great to have you. That being said, let's jump up to Roundtable Chat upstairs as it is, and vacate this stage channel now, please. And we'll be here again 8 p.m. tomorrow. I think we're going to have Flow for Rhythm talking about psychosis and money. Should be interesting. So join us in Roundtable Chat. We'll continue to chat for the rest of the night. Thank you, Bart. It was great to have you. Thank you, audience. We appreciate it. God bless.